Hello and welcome to the next bite-sized video on the medicine course, and this is looking at the Renaissance period, looking from 1500 to 1700. So this is a huge change in human history in this period, and we see a cultural shift in attitudes, and it's important to consider the context of this, which enables change during the Renaissance. It enables medicine to change as well. We see the Renaissance, which means rebirth in French, is a term that's used in the 19th century to describe a period of time where discoveries and learning were revisited, and especially a lot of the work of the ancients, like the Greeks and the Romans as well. We see a desire for learning, and challenging conservative ideas and new ideas as well. We see lots of change in artwork. We can see here Botticelli's Birth of Venus, and the artwork started to become far more realistic. That's going to help medicine in the future as well, with some of the anatomical drawings. Architecture changes. In the top left there, that is the Duomo Cathedral in Florence, and the idea that a dome could be built, showing that more kind of innovation. And also on the bottom left, we've got Da Vinci's famous portrait there, which is kind of looking at again, challenging this idea about what we call humanism. This idea of celebrating human achievements as well, rather than that of religion and that of God as well. And again, like we said, looking back at the ancient ideas that are going to challenge some of the new ideas, some of the remaining ideas that we had in the Middle Ages. Again, contextually, hugely important during this period as well, which enables that change. Number one on the left is the impact of the Protestant Reformation. So in 1517, a German monk, Martin Luther, gave a list of 95 theses, 95 reasons for why he criticized or thought the church was corrupt, the Catholic Church was corrupt. He was arguing this based on a kind of wealth principle, that the church were not allowing for independent and the freedom of worship, which Luther believed was the key to being a good Christian, was accessing the Word of God by yourself. Obviously, the Catholic Church doesn't operate like that, as we spoke about in the last video. It's all about things being in Latin and the priest having that access, and you listening to the priest to have received the Word of God. Luther argues that it should be independent. His idea spreads like wildfire across Europe, and it is enabled by the invention on the right-hand side there of the printing press. So the printing press is first invented by a German called Johannes Gutenberg in 1448, but the invention spreads into different countries, and it's probably around the early 16th century, so the early 1500s, it really has a huge impact in Britain. We're going to start to see people accessing books for the very first time because they become cheaper, whereas in the Middle Ages, books were written by hand. Luther is going to call for the Bible to be written in native languages, so we're going to see the Bible translated into English, and that was going to be available for people to start to read, so people started to improve their literacy, and we're going to see other books being used that are going to help spread that access of knowledge. Through those individuals, one is English in Harvey and the other was Belgian in Vesalius, but these two individuals are massively important. And the ideals of the Renaissance, this idea of challenging the status quo, the original ideas, being progressive, experimenting, those Renaissance ideals are found in the work of Vesalius and Harvey, but also the fact that their ideas were able to spread because of the invention of the printing press as well. Andreas Vesalius studies at the University of Padua, which massively encouraged dissection of the human body and discovering and experimenting. And through his dissections, he's able to prove on 700 accounts that Galen was incorrect. Now, his most important discovery is that the septum in the heart had a soft piece of tissue in the middle of it. Now, that was going to be a massively important discovery that would have an impact later on with William Harvey, but already Vesalius was showing that Galen wasn't correct on many accounts, and this is the first time that Galen's work had been challenged in over 1,000 years. And obviously with the Reformation, it meant that the Catholic Church were finally able to be criticised, and people were able to challenge those existing ideas as well. The Fabric of the Human Body is the book, one of the books, or the most famous book that Vesalius has printed in 1543, and that's the front cover, one of the images in there. That's the muscle man, and we can see how accurate these drawings are. Vesalius hired artists from Italy to draw lots of his findings, and they were really, really accurate. This was then accessible for doctors' training. So Vesalius had a huge impact on improving medical knowledge, but the knowledge of the anatomy. So that anatomical knowledge was massively improved. Harvey, who lives a lot later than Vesalius, in the kind of early to mid 17th century, uses the work of Vesalius. They studied at the same university at Padua, so those similar ideas of experimentation and scientific methods were also encouraged. And through the scientific method, William Harvey is able to discover that blood circulates around the body. He uses that idea that the septum is in the middle, soft piece of tissue, blood must go around, and he's able to prove again that Galen is incorrect. Galen believed that blood pumped around from the liver, and that you had an unlimited supply of blood. That's based on the theory of the four humours. Harvey is able to prove that this theory is false. He does it through, again, as we said, the scientific method. He proves his theory. He writes up his theory. Although he did receive opposition at first because of how entrenched the idea of the four humours was. The University of Paris famously refuses to teach Harvey's teachings. But as the century wore on and we get into the 1700s, the idea of bloodletting eventually becomes redundant. Some other examples of further progress as well. With Vesalius and Harvey are the two titans, really, but we also see, again, through the printing press, we see books being accessible that can help not just those who are in a medical profession, but your average person. So Nicholas Culpeper writes his complete herbal, and that had lots of herbal remedies that were not new, but the fact that they were now in written word meant that they could be spread far easier, again improving knowledge and improving people's understanding of treatment. In the middle is a book that was written by Thomas Sydenham about observation. Sydenham was referred to as the English Hippocrates. He emphasizes careful observation, so he makes the idea of the physician more professional, more what we would recognize. He was actually against the idea of bloodletting. Sydenham believed more so in rest and recuperation. Famously would prescribe roast chicken and red wine. But he also starts to think that different diseases require different treatments, and that's quite revolutionary at the time. Whereas in the Middle Ages, quite often we would have the same treatment for different diseases, really, that obviously did work. Sydenham starts to realise, no, there are different categories of disease that need different treatment. The final thing there is the infamous blood transfusion between a man and a dog. Obviously, it didn't work, but this is from the Royal Society. So in 1662, King Charles II puts his name and patronage towards a group of learned people, scientists, physicians, philosophers, Sir Isaac Newton famously amongst them, and they discuss new medical ideas and new medical thinking. Again, this idea of what we said before about humanism, celebrating human achievement, looking to improve learning all of the time. So the Royal Society are quite a significant part of the Renaissance era as well. Just like in the Middle Ages, a huge epidemic like the Black Death, but also the Great Plague, 1665, are great windows into the kind of understandings and the psyche of people at the time as well. 1665, during the reign of King Charles II, the bubonic plague breaks out. It mainly hits London, but it also hits other parts of the country as well. But London is hit hardest. Around 100,000 people die within the summer of 1665, which obviously had that's a huge amount of people that were killed at the time as well. There's a big difference in preventative methods during the Great Plague because of the Reformation. the Catholic Church lost a lot of its influence over hospitals, and hospitals began to be run by local governments, and local governments also started to have more authority and take more control in towns and cities as well. So the Lord Mayor of London acts very quickly, and he passes a series of orders during the Great Plague, mainly to avoid its spread. So the use of watchmen who would stand outside the door if a house was infected. But we do see the Red Cross, so we're still seeing supernatural. You'd have examiners and searchers, so these people would check the bodies of the dead to make sure that they weren't, if they were plague victims, that place needed to be quarantined, and also checking parish records to see if there'd been certain outbreaks in certain part of the city as well. But the kind of key thing on this image is a bonfire. So miasma is still a dominant theory during the Great Plague. Bonfires were lit across the city, and that was massively encouraged by the government as well. So we're still seeing that lack of understanding of what caused the plague as well. The Red Crosses again tell us the supernatural. King Charles II ordered public fasting, public prayer. We still see church bells being rung to disrupt the air as well. So we're seeing a lot of those similarities during the Great Plague. However, there is a greater understanding about close contact and this idea of transference. So, that disease is contagious. We see butchers only accepting money that had been put in vinegar. We also see the killing of lots of stray cats and dogs in the city. 200,000 cats, 40,000 dogs are killed because it's believed that they are spreading miasma. So whilst they don't understand how the disease has been spread, they are starting to understand that disease can be spread quickly, and getting to the root cause is really, really important. We've already talked about some continuity from the Renaissance as well, but just a couple of key other things here as well. Whilst the Catholic Church had lost its dominance, that's not to say that religion did not play a major role in everyday life. In fact, more so. It just happened to be the Protestant faith that was being worshipped as well. So still Christianity, still worshipping God. And we still have supernatural beliefs that take place. We already talked about the Great Plague, about the crosses. There's still this belief in the movement of the planets and astrology. And on the left-hand side here, we see King Charles in the middle there, famously touching the head of someone who has the skin condition called scrofula, which was referred to as King's Evil. And it was the belief that, the physical touch of the king, because the king was chosen by God, would lead to you being healed from scrofula. From 1660 to 1682, 92,000 different people, visited King Charles's court to be touched by the king in order to be cured as well. So we're still seeing that supernatural there. And on the right hand side is bloodletting. So bloodletting, despite Harvey's discovery that blood circulates around the body, bloodletting is still a massively popular theory that is used, hard to shake off because it's so embedded in people's thoughts. Charles II, when he becomes ill in the 1680s, the first thing that happens is that he is bloodlet by his physicians. That's the first thing that they do. So despite all of this medical knowledge of the anatomy, of physiology, things like the Royal Society, all of these things don't really mean anything because they still didn't understand what caused disease in the Renaissance, and they were still relying on the same ideas from the Middle Ages as well. Once the bloodletting doesn't work on Charles, unsurprisingly, they start to revert to more extreme superstitious methods. We get the bezoar stone from the Persian goat. We get Peruvian bark and the spirit of crushed human skull. Again, all these superstitious remedies don't work as well. So that is the video on the Renaissance. Hopefully you found this helpful. Again, tune in next time for the next video, which will look at medicine in the industrial age.